You know that moment when a loved one says something so absurd that you just stare, waiting for the punchline? That was me last Friday night. I was curled up on our couch, snug in my favorite oversized hoodie, sipping tea, when my husband, Daniel, turned to me with that look. If you're married, you know the one. The expression that means, I'm about to say something ridiculous, but hear me out. Lena, he said, his tone far too serious for someone holding a slice of pizza. I have an idea. In our decade together, I'd heard my fair share of Daniel's so-called ideas. Some were harmless, like when he thought he could build a backyard sauna from scrap wood. Spoiler alert, he could not. Others were, let's say, less reasonable, like the time he was convinced we should sell everything and live in a van, despite the fact that he gets grumpy on road trips longer than 3 hours. So, naturally, I braced myself. Okay, I said, drawing out the word. Should I be worried? He grinned. No, this one's actually good. Life-changing even. That's when my stomach did that weird little flip. The kind that tells you the next words out of someone's mouth might alter your life. Daniel leaned in, eyes practically glowing with excitement. Wait, let me back up for a second. To understand why this was such a big moment, you need to know something about us. Daniel is the dreamer, the guy who jumps headfirst into ideas without worrying about little details like practicality, money, or, basic survival. I, on the other hand, am the planner. I make lists. I do research. I think 3 steps ahead. We balance each other out. His wild impulsiveness meets my grounded skepticism, which is why, when he finally said it, when those 6 little words left his mouth, my first reaction was to laugh. And then, something unexpected happened. I actually thought about it. And that, my friends, is where the real story begins. Because somehow, against all logic, reason, and probably my own common sense, I said yes. Now, before you start guessing, are they moving to a deserted island? Quitting their jobs to raise llamas? Training for a space mission? Let me stop you. It's even crazier than that. And by the end of this story, you'll either think we've completely lost our minds or you'll start wondering if maybe, just maybe, you should try it too. So buckle up, because what happened next changed everything. I stared at Daniel, waiting for him to smirk and admit this was a joke. But he didn't. In fact, his grin only grew wider, his eyes gleaming like a kid about to reveal a huge secret. All right, I said, setting my tea down. What exactly are you suggesting? He took a deep breath, as if preparing for the sales pitch of his life. Hold on, hear me out, swap lives for a month. I blinked. Excuse me? You and me, we switch roles, completely. You take over my world and I take over yours. Let me explain something real quick. Daniel and I may be married, but our daily lives couldn't be more different. He runs a small but successful carpentry business, spending his days designing and building furniture, working with tools, and tossing around heavy slabs of wood like they weigh nothing. Meanwhile, I'm a freelance writer. My days revolve around endless hours at my laptop, writing articles, editing projects, and occasionally battling imposter syndrome in pajama pants. So, when my dear husband proposed we swap lives for a month, my brain short-circuited. You want me to build furniture? I asked, half laughing, half panicking. And I'll handle your deadlines, emails, and writing assignments, he said proudly, as if this was the most reasonable trade in the world. I gawked at him. Daniel, you haven't written anything longer than a grocery list since college. He waved a dismissive hand. How hard can it be? You sit, you type, you drink coffee. I scoffed. And you think I can just build things? You're always saying you wish you knew how to use power tools. Yes, but I meant in theory. Exactly. Now you'll get real experience. I stared at him, waiting for the absurdity of his own plan to hit him. But no, he just kept looking at me like he'd come up with the most brilliant idea of all time. You're serious, I finally said, as a heart attack. And that's when something strange happened. Instead of immediately shutting him down, because let's be real, that would have been the logical response. I actually considered it. Maybe it was the monotony of my daily routine, the predictability of my to-do lists. Maybe it was the challenge, the sheer insanity of it, or the fact that, for the first time in a long while, Daniel and I were looking at an adventure together instead of watching them play out on a screen. So let me get this straight, I said slowly. I spend a month in your workshop learning to build furniture, while you take over my writing gigs and handle my clients? Daniel nodded. Exactly. And we don't help each other? Nope. Full immersion. I took a deep breath, fully aware that this was not the kind of decision I usually made. But maybe that was exactly why I was about to make it. Fine, I said, crossing my arms. I'll do it. And that's when Daniel's grin turned downright mischievous, because as always, he was already one step ahead of me. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of fresh coffee and the faint sound of Daniel rummaging through my office. That was my first clue that I might have made a terrible mistake. I walked in to find him sitting at my desk, a determined expression on his face as he squinted at my laptop screen. So, he said, do you just stare at this thing all day? Or is there some kind of magic spell to make words appear? I crossed my arms. You open a blank document and write. He turned to me with a pained look. Just like that? No warm-up drills? No stretches? I sighed. You do realize I have actual deadlines, right? Clients who expect decent work? Daniel cracked his knuckles like a man gearing up for battle. Don't worry, babe. I got this. I had zero confidence in that statement. But before I could argue, he gestured toward the kitchen. Your turn. Workshop opens at 9. I glanced at the clock, 8:42 a.m. That meant I had exactly 18 minutes to mentally come to terms with the fact that I was about to step into Daniel's world. A world filled with massive equipment, sawdust floating in the air, and an alarming disregard for basic safety measures. Fantastic. The trade had officially begun. By the time I made it to the workshop, I was already regretting everything. The scent of freshly cut wood filled the space, and Daniel's longtime apprentice, Kevin, was watching me with an expression that barely hid his amusement. So, he said, casually leaning against a workbench. Boss says you're in charge today. I let out a sharp breath. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. My goal is just to make it through the day in one piece. Kevin chuckled. Fair enough. First lesson, meet your new best friend. He handed me a power drill. I accepted it hesitantly, gripping it like it might go off at any second. Relax, he said. It's not an explosive. Easy for you to say, I muttered. Meanwhile, across town, Daniel was experiencing my world firsthand, and judging by the flood of texts he sent me all morning, things were quickly falling apart. Daniel. What's passive voice, and why are 3 different people furious at me for using it? Daniel. Your email inbox is a disaster zone. How do you function like this? Daniel. I just wrote 2,000 words on the psychology of home decor. How did you not lose your mind? I smirked at my phone, but before I could type a reply, Kevin clapped his hands together. All right, let's get started. First project, building a chair. I nearly dropped the drill. A chair? Like an actual usable chair? Well, that is what chairs are for, he said, clearly entertained. I shut my eyes and took a deep breath. I had spent years refining my ability to paint vivid pictures with words. But now I had to physically create something. And just when that reality had me panicking, my phone buzzed with a new text from Daniel. One that almost made me drop it completely. Daniel. Hey, so I might have just agreed to a huge project with one of your clients. No big deal. We'll talk later. I froze, staring at my screen as my stomach flipped. No big deal? Was he serious? I immediately tried calling him. Straight to voicemail. A wave of panic started rising in my chest. But before I could spiral too hard, Kevin clapped a hand on my shoulder. You okay? No, I was not okay. My husband, who assumed writing was just sitting and typing, had apparently taken it upon himself to make business decisions for me. Meanwhile, I was still struggling to hold a drill without looking completely incompetent. But Kevin was waiting, so I forced a stiff smile. Yeah, let's make this chair. Across town, Daniel was quickly realizing he had vastly underestimated my job. His morning had been a whirlwind of unanswered emails, an uncooperative blinking cursor, and frantic Google searches like, what does tighten up the pros mean? And how to sound like you know what you're talking about. But the real disaster struck when a client named Rachel Porter called. Rachel was important. One of my longest-standing clients, a lifestyle guru with a massive audience. And somehow, in a moment of completely misplaced confidence, Daniel not only spoke to her, but convinced her he could take on a huge assignment she'd been hesitant about. A 10,000-word feature. Due in a week. Now, as he stared at the confirmation email she'd just sent, reality crashed over him. He was completely screwed. Back at the workshop, I was discovering something crucial. I was horrible at this. Kevin had walked me through every step, but after an hour, All I had to show for my efforts was a pitiful, lopsided wooden frame that wobbled at the slightest touch. Kevin studied it, rubbing his chin. Okay, so structurally, this is questionable. I groaned. I'm a disaster. Hey, everyone starts somewhere, he reassured me. You think Daniel was a master carpenter on day one? That made me laugh. Bitterly. Number. But at least he had some idea of what he was doing. Kevin gave me a pointed look. And you think he knows what he's doing right now? That shut me up fast. Because Daniel? Oh, he was definitely drowning. And then, just as I was starting to find a shred of confidence, accepting that maybe I could someday build something that wouldn't collapse, my phone vibrated again. Daniel, we have a problem. I typed back immediately. Me. We? What did you do? The typing bubble appeared, disappeared, reappeared. Then, Daniel, I think I just lost Rachel's contract. I forgot to breathe. No. Rachel was a dream client. Losing her would be catastrophic. My fingers clenched around my phone as panic surged through me. For the first time since we started this insane challenge, it truly hit me. This wasn't just an amusing experiment anymore. This was real, and we may have just made a huge mistake. My grip on my phone tightened so much I was surprised it didn't crack. Me. What do you mean you lost Rachel's contract? This time, Daniel called. I picked up before the first ring had even finished. Okay, before you freak out. Oh, Daniel, I am definitely freaking out, I snapped. In fact, I might actually combust. Explain. He exhaled loudly. I was trying to sound competent, you know? Confident. I figured if I acted like I knew what I was doing, she wouldn't question it. I groaned. And then? Well, then she started asking about strategy, like SEO placement, keyword optimization, content structuring. I squeezed my eyes shut. You pitched to Rachel without knowing how to back it up? I thought I could handle it, he defended. But the second I hesitated, just for a second, she got suspicious. She asked if I had actual experience writing long-form lifestyle pieces, and when I didn't answer fast enough, she said she'd reconsider her options and hung up. My stomach dropped. Losing Rachel wasn't just about losing one paycheck. She was high profile. If word got out that I wasn't dependable, my entire business could suffer. I inhaled sharply. Daniel, this is bad. Really bad. I know, he groaned. I messed up. I pinched the bridge of my nose. Okay, maybe I can fix this. I'll call her, explain that you were... Before I could finish, Kevin appeared at my side holding something. Lena? His voice had a tone, a concerned tone. We've got a problem. I turned to him, then down at the broken piece of wood in his hands. I blinked. What is that? Kevin shifted uncomfortably. The leg of your chair. I stepped closer, eyes scanning the workbench where my half-finished chair should have been. Except it wasn't. Instead, it lay in pieces on the floor. I inhaled sharply. It collapsed. Kevin rubbed the back of his neck. More like, it exploded. Daniel's voice crackled through the phone. Wait, what exploded? I ignored him. I spent all day working on that chair. Kevin offered an apologetic shrug. I mean, technically, it did stand for a little while. I clenched my jaw. First, my business was unraveling, and now my actual physical work was falling apart too. And that's when it hit me. Daniel and I weren't just struggling. We were failing. I had assumed I could step into his world and build things like it was no big deal. He had thought writing was just typing words onto a screen. But here we were, me standing in the wreckage of my so-called woodworking project, and him on the other end of the phone, having completely ruined a major business deal. We weren't just out of our depth. We were crashing and burning. And if we didn't find a way to fix this soon, it wouldn't just be an amusing story. It would be a complete disaster. I stood frozen, staring at the wreckage of what was supposed to be a chair, my heart pounding like a drum. On the other end of the call, for the first time since this ridiculous experiment began, Daniel was silent. Neither of us had a sarcastic remark. Neither of us had a shred of confidence left. Because, without question, we had both completely and utterly failed. I exhaled slowly, raking a hand through my hair. All right, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. We need to fix this. Daniel sighed. Yeah, but how? Rachel already thinks I'm a fraud and you just apparently detonated a chair. Kevin snorted. More of a dramatic collapse. I shot him a look before turning back to the real problem. I'll call Rachel. If I explain the situation, the real situation, maybe I can fix this. And I'll help you rebuild the chair, Kevin added. The right way this time. I nodded. Right. And Daniel? He hesitated. Yeah? You need to write something. Anything. Show Rachel you're serious. Prove you can do this, even if it takes a dozen rewrites. Daniel groaned. But I suck at this. I clenched my jaw. And you think I'm just naturally talented at woodworking? Silence. Then, finally, he let out a defeated sigh. Point taken. I ended the call, took a steadying breath, and dialed Rachel. To my surprise, she picked up after just 2 rings. Lena, she greeted, her tone sharp and professional. I assume this is about our earlier conversation? Yes, I answered, keeping my voice firm but respectful. And I want to be upfront with you about what's going on. I laid it all out. How Daniel and I had switched roles for a month, how we had both misjudged each other's work, and how, yes, he had definitely oversold himself. I won't lie to you, Rachel. He panicked, but he's willing to put in the effort. If you give him one more shot, I promise he'll deliver something worth your time. The line went silent. A long pause. Then, suddenly, she let out a small chuckle. Well, she said, amusement creeping into her voice. That is one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard. I winced. But, she interrupted, I'll give him another chance. I nearly collapsed with relief. Tell him he has 3 days. If he impresses me, I'll keep the contract. 3 days, I repeated, my heart still racing. He won't let you down. She laughed. Oh, I fully expect him to struggle, but I'm curious to see if he surprises me. Rachel hadn't completely written Daniel off. I hung up and turned to Kevin. All right, let's build a chair. By the time that day ended, I had actually done it. With Kevin's guidance, and let's be honest, a lot of help, I built something that didn't immediately fall apart. And back at home, Daniel was actually writing. Neither of us had seen this coming. But maybe, just maybe, we could actually pull this off. 3 days. That was all Daniel had to prove himself. And I swear I had never seen my husband take something so seriously. For 72 hours, our house became his personal writer's boot camp. He barely left my office, downing coffee like a college student cramming for finals, muttering things like, "Why do words hate me?" And, "How does Lena make this look easy?" Meanwhile, I was back in the workshop, determined to prove to myself that my one successful chair wasn't just a fluke. With Kevin's help, and actual blueprints this time, I built another, then another. By the time Daniel submitted his final draft to Rachel, I had 3 fully functional chairs sitting in the workshop. None of them wobbled. None of them fell apart. A personal victory. But the real question was, had Daniel pulled off his own miracle? The day Rachel emailed back, I swear, Daniel forgot how to breathe. I watched as he clicked on her message, his hand hovering over the mouse. If this is bad, he mumbled, just remember I love you. I rolled my eyes. Open it. He did. And then, nothing. Silence. I couldn't take it anymore. Daniel? His mouth fell open in shock. Then, slowly, a grin spread across his face. She liked it. I blinked. Wait, what? He turned the laptop toward me. Rachel's reply was short, but it was everything we needed. Impressive. Not perfect, but impressive. Let's move forward. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. You did it. He shook his head, still stunned. I actually did it. The challenge was over. Our lives were about to return to normal. But were we the same? For years, I had thought of Daniel's job as pure physical labor. Difficult, sure, but straightforward. Yet after weeks of struggling through it, I saw it differently. It wasn't just cutting wood and hammering nails. It was patience, precision, problem solving. And Daniel? He had finally learned that writing wasn't just sitting down and typing. He had faced deadlines, rewrites, self-doubt, the whole creative battle, and now he respected it in a way he never had before. On the last night of our challenge, we sat outside, staring at the 3 chairs I had built. Daniel laughed. I still don't know how you pulled that off. I smirked. And I still don't know how you survived, Rachel Porter. We clinked our glasses together. To never underestimating each other again, I said. To never switching jobs again, he corrected. I grinned. Agreed.